I pulled my truck into the driveway a little after 11, 18 days on a fire assignment behind me, ash and pine sap crusted into the creases of my hands. All I wanted was my own bed. Then I came around the side of my house into the side yard, and I saw her, Maren, my next-door neighbor, halfway over my fence, barefoot, in a tank top and sleep shorts. She turned, eyes wide when she found me standing there in the dark, and whispered, voice shaking, "Please, let me stay at your place tonight." Before I could ask her anything, I heard it, pounding on her front door, a man's voice, slurred and loud, dragging her name out into the street. "My name is Emmett Cole. I'm 35, and I've run a wildland fire crew out of Red Wing, a small town in the Oregon Cascades, for 11 years. Fire season runs June through October. I go out on assignment for 2, sometimes 3 weeks at a stretch, chasing whatever's burning across 5 states. Then I get maybe 10 days home before dispatch calls again. Off-season, winter and early spring, is training in prescribed burns, which at least keeps me in town more nights than not. That's been the shape of my life since I was 24, and I never once wanted a different one. I was married before. Her name was Paige, 2 years younger than me. We lasted 2 years before it came apart, and it came apart over the schedule, the empty side of the bed all summer, the anniversaries I called in for from a spike camp instead of showed up to, the way I smelled like smoke for the first 2 showers I took once I got home. She wanted me to take the inspector job at the county fire marshal's office. A desk, a truck with air conditioning, hours you could actually put on a calendar. I told her I'd think about it. I was still thinking about it the week I came off a fire early and found out she'd stopped waiting on me to decide. There'd been somebody else for a while by then. We signed the papers 2 years ago. No kids, which I was grateful for, even in the worst stretch of it. I don't hate Paige. I need that on the record before anything else. Because of what comes later, I just got tired of who I turned into around her, a man constantly explaining himself, constantly apologizing for being exactly the guy he'd told her he was from the start. After the divorce, I bought a small house on the quiet end of Larkspur Street, 2 bedrooms, a carport, a wood fence around the back. The last owner never bothered to stain. Nothing special, but it was mine. And nobody asked where I'd been when I walked through that door. People assume a house like that gets lonely. It doesn't. Not the way they mean. It gets quiet. I'd come in at midnight, drop my pack by the door, and stand in the kitchen under the one light over the stove, and there'd be no sign of anybody but my own coffee ring on the counter from 3 weeks back. My mother taught me one thing that stuck. Leave the porch light on before you go, Emmett, so the place doesn't look like a grave when you get back. I never broke that habit. Every assignment, I lock the door, flip the switch, and leave one yellow bulb burning over an empty step. Then, 14 months ago, somebody moved into the house on the other side of that fence. Her name was Maren Ashcroft, 29, worked at a wildlife rehabilitation center up the highway, the kind of place that takes in hawks and owls with broken wings and nurses them back to flying condition. I met her on a Saturday in the kind of dry mountain heat that shows up 2 weeks a year before the smoke does, unloading a rental truck by herself, boxes stacked to her chin, not another person in sight. I was pulling into my carport when I watched her lose her grip on one and catch it against her knee, so I parked, walked over, said, "Let me help." Didn't ask her name, didn't ask where she wanted the boxes, carried 4 of them into her front room and set them under the window because that's where the others already were. Told her good luck with the move and started back toward my own place. She caught up with me at the edge of the driveway. "You really didn't have to do that. You were carrying them in the sun. I had 2 free hands." Thank you. Quiet, not the kind people say to fill a silence, the kind that actually lands somewhere and stays. I went inside and didn't think about it again. She worked at the rehab center. I chased fires. Every so often, we'd raise a hand across the fence, me pulling out at 4 in the morning with the crew buggy idling at the curb, her coming up the walk with groceries. That's all it was, for a long time, until it wasn't. 8 months ago, On a morning with an 18-day assignment in front of me, I opened my door before 5 and nearly stepped on it. A steel thermos wrapped in a dish towel, still warm through the metal. A note rubber-banded to the side, handwriting I didn't recognize. "You look like you haven't had a hot meal in days, Eam." I stood there in the dark with my keys in my hand, not sure what to do with the feeling sitting in my chest. Nobody had asked me what I'd been eating. I hadn't complained to a soul. She'd just looked and seen it and done something about it without making me say a single word. I drank it at a gas station outside Bend with the truck idling, sun coming up pink over the pumps, chicken and rice, ginger in it, salted exactly right. I sat there with both hands wrapped around that thermos and thought, when's the last time somebody cooked for me? I couldn't come up with an answer. That's the part that got me. I kept the note, rode around in my truck's door pocket for weeks. Every time I opened that door, I'd see it, a dozen words in a single letter, and something in my chest would do a thing I hadn't given it permission to do yet. I brought the thermos back 3 days later, washed, with a note of my own. Thank you. Ginger was the right call. After that, it just became a thing. Every assignment, I'd find something sitting on my step before dawn. Soup, mostly, chili once. Coffee on the mornings she somehow knew I'd run short on sleep the night before. She never knocked, never stood there waiting to be thanked. She'd set it down and go back inside, like she didn't want me carrying any weight for it. And I started noticing other things. The tomato plants in my back corner stopped dying while I was gone. New, because I'd already killed 2 rounds of them myself. My garbage bin was always rolled back from the curb by the time I got home. The porch bulb I left burning kept right on burning, month after month, and I know for a fact I never once changed it. Nobody said a word about any of it. There was no scorecard anywhere that I could find. Then one afternoon I got in early. A fire up near Shamul got contained faster than anybody expected, and I made it home 4 days ahead of schedule. I came around the side of my house and there she was, standing in my yard with my hose in her hand, watering my plants. She jumped a foot off the ground. "You're back early," she said. Not a question, a statement, like she'd had a schedule written down somewhere in her head, and I'd gone and moved it on her without permission. We talked over that fence for over an hour. She told me about the center, the hawks that come in with a wing they'll never fully fly on again, the way you have to let an owl decide about you before you ever reach toward the enclosure, the long shifts that end with somebody crying in the parking lot over a bird they couldn't save. She told me about her own cat, a scrappy orange thing named Cinder. No relation to her job, just a stray who'd wandered up one winter and never left. I told her about the line at 3 in the morning on a big fire, headlamp swallowed up in smoke, radio gone quiet, nothing ahead of you but drip torches and the sound of your own crew moving. That's the part of the job I actually like, I told her. Most people never get that. She thought about it and said, "That sounds like church." Then she asked what the crew buggy looked like inside. I told her the honest answer, a school bus somebody bolted storage lockers into. She said she'd like to see it sometime. I laughed it off. She said that wasn't really the point, and I let that go right past me like weather. It had been 2 years since I'd strung that many words together with anybody who wasn't a dispatcher. 5 months ago, I gave her a key. Wasn't a moment, or I didn't think it was one at the time. I'd watched her swing a leg over that fence one too many times with a watering can in her hand, and it just seemed foolish. "You've been keeping my yard alive for months and climbing a fence to do it," I said. "Take this." She looked down at that key in her palm for a long few seconds, longer than a key ought to take. Then she said, "I'll keep your house standing. Emmett." I laughed and went inside and thought nothing more of it. She put it on her own ring right there in the driveway, not a pocket, not a drawer at home, on the ring with her car key and her front door key, where a person keeps the things they touch every single day. I watched her do that and didn't think anything of that either. It's remarkable what a man can look straight at and still not see. Here's what I can tell you now, having had a lot of time to turn it over since it wasn't a favor. When you hand somebody a key, you're saying a thing you don't have any other words for. You're saying, I trust you inside my life when I'm not in it." She heard that. I didn't. Not yet. Every single time I came home, within about a day there'd be a knock with a reason attached to it. She'd bring the key back, except I'd never once asked for it back. She'd bring over banana bread because she'd made too much, which is a thing that has never once happened to any human being in the history of baking. And it would have walnuts in it, because I'd mentioned walnuts once in passing 4 months earlier. She'd ask me to look at her kitchen faucet, and I'd get down under her sink with a wrench, and the faucet would be fine, always fine. I'd stand up and tell her so, and she'd say, "Huh, weird," and offer me a beer. I thought she was being friendly. I honestly did. I thought I'd gotten lucky with a good neighbor. And it was changing me too, and I didn't clock that either. I started angling for the shorter assignments when dispatch gave me a choice. Quit taking the extra rest day at a fire camp when I could push through and get home a night early instead. I started listening for her screen door. I'd be out back with a beer after a long assignment, not doing anything in particular, and that door would bang shut 2 yards over, and I'd already be on my feet before I'd decided to stand. It wasn't the house. Let's be honest. A house is a house. It was that when I pulled into the driveway on Larkspur Street and walked up in the dark with my pack. There was a decent chance somebody would be standing on the other side of that fence with a thermos in her hands and a, "Hey, stranger." She never once asked me to stay. She was just there when I was there. I didn't have a name for it yet, but it had already become the best part of my week. 3 weeks before the night she came over my fence, my phone rang at a gas station outside Klamath Falls. Paige. 2 years of nothing. And there was her name lit up on the screen at 9 at night while I was eating a sandwich in my truck. I answered, "Habit." Probably. Her voice came through sweet, a particular kind of sweet I knew from experience, the kind she used when she wanted something and hadn't worked out yet how to ask for it. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. I told her I was fine, appreciated the call, had a 4 my muster the next morning, hung up, sat there a while with that sandwich going cold on my knee. Because I know that woman. Paige doesn't check on people. Paige checks up on them. There's a difference, and I'd been married to that difference for 2 years. I didn't mention the call to anybody, not even to Maren. Figured it was nothing. That one's on me. So, the night, I want to go back and tell it the whole way through, because the first time I only gave you the part I understood at the time. I'd pulled into the driveway a little after 11, 18 days on assignment and back. Crickets going hard, the air still holding the day's heat, my legs feeling like somebody else's after that many hours on the line. I came around the side of the house, and she was halfway over the fence. Then I heard the rest of it, a fist hammering her front door, a man's voice thick with liquor, dragging her name out into the street like he had some right to it. I got her inside. She was shaking, and it wasn't the cold. It was warm enough at 11 at night in August that the crickets hadn't even slowed down. She sat at my kitchen table with both hands around a glass of water and told me about him. An ex from before Red Wing. He was the reason she'd picked this town in the first place, blocked his number, changed her whole routine, moved 3 hours up into the mountains from everybody she'd ever known. He'd found her anyway. Showed up drunk on her porch wanting to talk, wanting her outside, wanting and wanting and wanting. I called it in. Officers came, walked him off her porch, left her a card with a number and told her to file a report in the morning. Then it was just the two of us in my kitchen at midnight. I gave her the bedroom, took the couch. She argued about it for maybe 4 seconds, then let it go. Around 1 in the morning, I heard water running in the kitchen. She was making tea in the thermos, the steel one that had been living on my shelf between assignments for 8 months. She caught me looking. It's the only thing in this kitchen I know where it goes. We sat at that table until almost 3. I don't remember all of it. I remember she laughed once, out loud, at something dumb I said about a dispatcher in Klamath Falls, then put her hand over her mouth like she'd broken a rule by laughing on a night like that one. Nothing happened. I want to be clear about that too. Nothing happened. But the distance between us was gone. And you can't put that back once it's gone. The next morning I woke up on the couch with my neck ruined and the whole house smelling like coffee. She'd found the eggs. She was wearing one of my flannels over her tank top because everything she owned was on the other side of a fence and a police report. 2 years I'd stood in that kitchen listening to nothing but the stove light humming. That morning there was a second set of sounds in it. A pan, a drawer, somebody humming badly. I'm not going to pretend I didn't notice how much I liked it. 2 weeks later I came home from a short assignment, 3 days out and back, ahead of schedule again. She was already out on her porch with the thermos in her hands, like she'd heard my truck at the end of the street and come out to sit with it warm. We started eating dinner together whenever I was home. Nothing announced. Her place one night, mine the next, whatever was sitting in the fridge. Still nobody said one word out loud about any of it. But I'd started counting days until I'd be back. 11 years of never once counting, and all of a sudden I was counting. Then, 3 weeks after that night, somebody knocked on my door at noon on a Tuesday. Paige. Portland is 3 hours from my porch, and she'd driven every mile of it without a single call to say she was coming. She came in past me before I'd finished deciding whether to let her, the way she always did, and I caught that perfume, the expensive one, and for about a second and a half I was 29 again and hadn't learned a single thing yet. She stopped in the middle of my kitchen and took inventory. The steel thermos on the counter, a pair of women's canvas shoes by the door, small, set down neat. "So you've got somebody," she said. "That was fast." 2 years isn't fast. Paige, she laughed. That laugh, the one that always had a point buried somewhere in it. "The neighbor," she said. "The little bird rescue girl." That stopped me because I hadn't said one word about who it was. Then she went to work. "Do you have any idea what that girl does? She knows your schedule. Emmett, every time you get home, she's out there. Every time you leave, she's in your house. You think that's an accident? You think a woman just happens to be standing in the yard every single time your truck pulls in?" I didn't say anything. "And that night," she went on, "she'd heard about it somehow. This town talks. Some man shows up drunk on her porch, and she doesn't call the police from inside her own house. She doesn't run up the block to the Delgados, whose porch light burns all night. She climbs your fence barefoot at 11 o'clock. And you don't find that staged?" She let that sit in the air. "She's not caring for you, Emmett. She's collecting you." Here's the ugly part. I couldn't prove her wrong because Paige wasn't inventing a single fact. That was the whole trick of it. Maren did know my schedule. Maren did have a reason every time and no reason at all underneath it. She could have called for help from her own bathroom. She could have run to the Delgados. She hadn't. She'd come over my fence. Every fact Paige laid on my kitchen table was true. She'd just told the truth from an angle that made it land exactly like a blade. And I'd spent 2 years of my life being handled by that particular skill without ever once catching it happen. So when she stood there asking if I was being played, some scarred-over part of me thought, "How would you know? You didn't catch it last time either." I gave it a day, then 2. 2 days driving the back roads with the crew off shift, just so I wouldn't have to sit in that house doing arithmetic on a woman who had never once lied to me. Then I walked over to Maren's, up the front walk to her actual door, like a person. Didn't go near that fence. She opened it and read my face in about a second and a half. "She came to see you," she said. Not a question. I asked her everything straight out, standing right there in her doorway. No gentle way into any of it. "Do you know my schedule?" "Yes." "Have you been making up reasons to come over here?" "Yes." The faucet, had it ever actually been broken? It dripped once, in March. She didn't try to sell any of it. She just let it sit there, as small and stupid as it actually was. "You could have called the police from inside your own bathroom that night," I said. "You could have gone to any door on this street. Why mine? Why the fence?" She didn't defend herself. Not one word of it. She started crying instead, not the kind aimed at anybody. The kind that comes out sideways when somebody's been carrying something a long time and finally gets to set it down. "I've been in love with you since the day you carried my boxes without asking my name," she said. "I didn't know how to say that to anybody, so I made soup. I watered your plants. I found reasons to knock on your door, and every reason was real. Emmett, I did need help with that faucet. I did bake too much bread. My car really did need a jump in February. But underneath every one of them, there was the same reason, and it never changed once. I wanted to be near you. I made her say that last part twice, not because I doubted it, because I'd been standing in my own kitchen 2 days before, listening to somebody explain that nobody had ever really wanted me for me, and I needed a second pass at the sound of the opposite. That night I was scared. That part was real too, all of it. He was on my porch and I was scared out of my mind. I could have called for help from inside my own house. I could have run to the Delgados. She looked up at me. I saw your truck at the end of the street, and I thought, if not now, then never. So I climbed the fence. Then she said the thing I'll be hearing for the rest of my life. I wasn't running away from him. I was running toward you. I stood in that doorway and couldn't get a word out for a while, because there it was. The difference Paige had spent an hour smearing over in my kitchen. Paige hid the truth so she could steer me with it. Maren had arranged a whole year of her life around getting close to me, then handed me every piece of it the second I asked, knowing full well I could turn around and walk. That is not the same thing. It isn't in the same neighborhood as the same thing. I thought about what Paige would have done standing in that doorway getting asked those questions. She'd have gotten loud, turned it around until I was the one apologizing on somebody else's front step. Maren just told me the truth and let it land wherever it landed. I went home, sat at my kitchen table and never turned the light on. The thermos was up on the shelf where it lived, late afternoon coming through the window over the sink, pooling on the steel, and I started counting. 8 months of soup. How many assignments was that? 20. More. Every one of them something waiting on the step at 5 in the morning, and not once did she stand there waiting to be thanked for it. 14 months of a woman making herself useful in 100 small ways so she'd have a reason to be near me. And not one of those ways ever cost me a thing. Not one came with a bill attached. That's the tell, if you're ever wondering. Love shows up carrying something. The other thing shows up carrying an invoice. And not once in 14 months did she ask me to stay home. Never asked me to quit. Never asked me to take the desk job or trade the fire line for a schedule you could set a clock by. Never asked me to be some smaller version of myself that was easier to keep track of. Then I thought about Paige. 2 years of come home, take the inspector job, be somebody else so I don't have to miss you. And when I didn't shrink fast enough to suit her, she found somebody already the right size and handed me the blame for the distance. Paige loved an idea of me she'd built herself and kept waiting for me to move into. Maren loved the actual man, smoke and pine sap, long silences, weeks gone at a stretch, and never once asked for a single renovation. Paige used the truth like a knife. Maren used it like an open hand. Everything on the table, palm up, your call. I sat there in that dark kitchen listening to that ridiculous orange cat carrying on through the wall. And then I made up my mind. I went out into my backyard and stood looking at the fence, 6 feet of gray, weathered pickets, the same board she'd come over 3 weeks earlier with her heart in her throat. I laughed at myself, standing alone in the dark at 35 years old, laughing. Then I climbed it. Different proposition at 35 than it is at 12. Got a boot on the rail, took a splinter in my palm for the trouble, came down on her side of it harder than I meant to. I knocked on her back door. She opened it in a t-shirt, hair thrown up crooked, eyes still red, and looked at me the way you look at somebody who's come to end something. I held out the thermos. I'd filled it myself. Coffee, black, no sugar. Because after everything I still didn't know how she took it, and figured I'd rather ask than guess. My turn, I said. She looked at the thermos, looked at me. Then she laughed. Small, wrecked, shaking. The sound a person makes when they finally get to put down something heavy they've been carrying with both arms. I didn't tell her I loved her that night. Wasn't going to hand her that on the same day I'd made her stand in a doorway explaining herself. What I said was, I should have climbed that fence a long time ago. She wiped her face and said, You could have used the gate. There was no gate. That was the joke. We both stood there knowing it. I sat on her back steps until the sky went gray. We didn't fix anything that night. We just sat there, and the sitting was the fixing. We took it slow after that. Slower than people expect from a story that starts the way this one did. Nothing announced. I kept running the crew. She kept working her long shifts, coming home smelling faintly of the enclosures. But when I pulled out at 5 in the morning, the thermos wasn't waiting on the mat anymore. She was standing at my front door holding it. The first time I kissed her was right there. Porch light on, engine cooling at the end of the street. I didn't plan it. Just leaned down and kissed her forehead. And she closed her eyes like she'd been waiting on it about a year. Which, as it turned out, she had. There was never one single moment it became official. That's the part nobody puts in the stories. It became official about 40 different times in 40 small ways, and I couldn't tell you which one counted. Paige called once more, about a month after that. I looked at the screen and let it ring. Not out of anger. I want that on the record too. I wasn't angry at her by then. There was just nothing left to say. She belonged to a version of my life that had already closed up, and I wasn't going back in to turn the lights on for her. 6 months after that night, in the spring, I bought a hinge kit and a can of stain and cut a gate into that fence. Nothing fancy. Waist high, 2 hinges, a latch any determined orange cat could beat in under a minute. Took me one afternoon. Stained it to match the rest of the board so it wouldn't stand there looking like an apology. It still swings a little crooked. Never fixed it, and she's never asked me to. She came out on her side with her arms folded, grinning at it. No more climbing? No more climbing, I said. Unless you want to. She still leaves the thermos out before every assignment. I still bring it back washed with a note stuck to the side. Same ritual we had going before either one of us said a thing out loud. The habit never changed. Only what it meant did. The rest of it showed up slow, the way real things do. A second toothbrush in my bathroom. Cinder deciding my couch outranked hers and sleeping there whether she came along or not. Food in my refrigerator that got eaten before it went bad, which had not happened in that house one single time in 2 years. I'm still running the crew. That's the part people always want to ask about. So I'll answer it up front. I never quit. She never once asked me to. What she says instead, every single time, standing at the door with that thermos while the truck idles down the block, is this: come back safe, I'll be here. Those last 3 words. I'll be here. Paige never said them to me, not one time in 2 years, and I don't think she ever knew they were the whole thing. A year after the night she came over my fence, I got in off a long fire assignment on a cold October evening, parked in the driveway, killed the engine, walked up with my pack over my shoulder, the whole neighborhood smelling like somebody 2 streets over burning leaves. A good smell now. Finally, after a whole season of the other kind of smoke, my porch light was on. I'd left it myself, the way my mother taught me. But her porch light was on too, and it wasn't on for her because she wasn't over there. I let myself in. Her shoes were by the door, small, set down neat. Cinder was upside down on the couch, all 4 legs in the air, dead to the world. The thermos was sitting on the kitchen table, full, still warm. She'd made it before she fell asleep, because she knew roughly when I'd be rolling in. After all this time, she still knows my schedule better than dispatch does. I didn't call out to her, set my pack down quiet, walked back, and stood in the bedroom doorway just looking at her asleep with the hallway light caught in her hair. Stood there a lot longer than I needed to. 18 days on a fire line, and the last 20 feet of that walk home were the only part I ever wanted to slow down for. I used to think coming home meant killing an engine, unlocking a door, flipping on a light so the place wouldn't look like a grave. It doesn't. Coming home means the thermos is full and her shoes are by the door. That house on Larkspur Street was never home. It just took me the long way around to work that out. I still look at that fence sometimes. The gate's there now, but I left the rest of it standing, could have pulled a whole section out, never have, because it reminds me of something I don't want to forget. She came over it when she didn't have to. She had a phone, She had a whole street of porch lights to run to. She wasn't out of options. She picked the hardest way to get to the one person she wanted. Here's what that taught me. I used to think being managed and being loved looked the same from the inside. And they do, at first. Both of them pay attention to you. Both show up at the right moment. Both say the thing you needed to hear. There's exactly one way to tell them apart. The person managing you is afraid of what happens when you know the whole truth. The person who loves you hands you the whole truth, then stands there terrified and lets you decide. Maren handed me all of it, every reason, every excuse, every piece that looked bad in Paige's mouth, and just said, "That's everything, and it's your call." The thermos is still on the shelf. She fills it before every assignment. It's waiting on the table when I get back. Somebody asked me once what a fence actually is. It's a barrier. It's distance. It's what you build to keep the outside out. But a fence is also the thing the right person will climb. She didn't run away from him. She climbed the fence toward me. And that's how I knew it was real. So let me ask you two things. Has anybody ever chosen you, not because they'd run out of options, but because you were the first one they wanted? And if you'd been standing in my kitchen that Tuesday, would you have believed Maren, or would you have believed Paige? If this story stayed with you, hit like and tell me your answer down in the comments. I read everyone. It's in.